Hear me,
When
senators.
Saguntum fell,
Carthage
Rome
has crossed
officially
the
declared
Rubicon
war
of
on
our
Carthage
patience.
in early
I
218
declare
BCE. Thus began the Second Punic War, the War of Hannibal. At
Men,
that time,
this will be
Hannibal
our
was
final
spending the
stand.
winter in
We must
Carthago
hold this
Nova.
ground.
That same year, the Roman consuls were Publius Cornelius Scipio and Tiberius Sempronius Longus. Scipio commanded 2 legions composed of about 22,000 infantry and 2,200 cavalry, while Sempronius led 2 legions with about 24,000 infantry and 2,400 cavalry. Scipio's son would later become the famous Scipio Africanus, the man who ultimately defeated Hannibal. Scipio's initial theater of operations was Spain, while Sempronius was assigned to Sicily as a base for launching operations against Carthage itself.
When Rome planned its strategy, it gave little thought to northern Italy. By around 220 BCE, Rome had effectively conquered the Gallic territory south of the Alps, establishing colonies there and settling Roman citizens in the Po Valley region.
The Empire awaits its new city.
The Gauls who had been displaced from their lands were deeply resentful, but Rome regarded the area as firmly under its control and not a serious threat. Even if the Gauls were to rebel, the Romans believed local garrisons would suffice to suppress them. This, however, was a grave miscalculation. Hannibal adopted a strategy to cross the Alps and win over the Gallic tribes, turning them into allies. As a result, the war would begin in northern Italy, proof that Rome's strategic first button had been fastened wrong from the start.
Although Hannibal remained in Spain, he had no intention of fighting there. He knew that defeating Rome on foreign soil would not bring the Republic to its knees. His fundamental strategy was to break apart Rome's alliances. At the time, roughly 60% of Rome's military manpower came from allied cities.
Their supply lines are stretched
Hannibal's
thin
plan
here
was to
and
isolate
here.
Rome by persuading these
strike at
allies
dawn.
to defect. To achieve that, he needed to invade Italy itself and inflict defeats upon Rome on her own soil. Only such humiliation could shake the loyalty of her allies. Many of these allies, especially those in southern Italy, such as Samnium, Lucania, and Bruttium, had once fought bitter wars against Rome before being subdued. Those memories of conflict still lingered. Hannibal intended to exploit this by rallying the Gauls and other discontented peoples to Carthage's side.
In May 218 BCE, Hannibal set out from Carthago Nova with about 90,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants. He left 20,000 troops in Africa to defend Carthage itself, and stationed some in Spain to guard his rear. Although his army was large at the outset, not all of it would reach Italy. Some mercenaries deserted upon learning that the campaign would extend to Italy, beyond the terms of their contract. As Hannibal advanced through Gallic territory, he suffered losses in skirmishes with local tribes. And during the final stage, the crossing of the Alps, his army was ravaged by avalanches, freezing temperatures, treacherous terrain, and ambushes by mountain tribes.
Why then did Hannibal choose the perilous route across the Alps when easier paths existed? By this time, Carthage had lost control of the seas and could not transport troops by ship. A flat overland route through the Pyrenees and around the Alps would have been safer, but it also ran through regions loyal to Rome and her allies, where he could easily be blocked.
Prepare for battle!
Hannibal therefore took the audacious, unexpected route over the Alps themselves to take Rome by surprise.
To cross the Alps, Hannibal had to pass through the territories of Gallic tribes. These tribes were neither Roman allies nor Carthaginian supporters. Some he bribed with gifts and promises, asking only for safe passage. Others he had to fight through. At one point, Hannibal and Scipio nearly encountered each other. When Scipio landed by sea near Massilia, he learned that Hannibal had already begun marching northward. Scipio immediately set out in pursuit, but missed him by only a few days.
By midsummer, Hannibal had forced his way past hostile tribes and succeeded in crossing the Rhone River. Scipio arrived shortly afterward, but too late. Deciding his forces could not pursue Hannibal effectively, he left the main body of his army under the command of his brother Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio to continue operations in Spain, while he himself returned to Italy to prepare for a possible Carthaginian invasion. Some Gallic tribes informed him that Hannibal was indeed heading toward the Alps, but Rome did not see this as a serious threat. The Senate believed that crossing the Alps was impossible, and even if Hannibal somehow managed it, his army would be too exhausted and depleted to pose any real danger. Rome did not deny that Hannibal might attempt the crossing, but disastrously underestimated the consequences.
What fool?
Around mid-October, 218 BCE, Hannibal began his ascent into the Alps. At first, he followed paths used by locals, but as the elevation increased, the terrain became harsher and steeper. When trails disappeared, his men had to carve new ones out of rock. The army often had to march single file along narrow, dizzying ledges, where a single misstep could mean a plunge to death.
No! Hold on! Grab
Many
the rope!
non-combatants and animals fell to their deaths, and the loss of pack animals carrying supplies was especially heavy.
Steady now! Hold the line!
The tumbling beasts, laden with gear, looked like boulders crashing down the cliffs, according to later accounts.
As they climbed higher, the air grew thin and bitterly cold. Winter storms swept across the peaks, and knife-like winds battered the troops. The icy rock paths terrified both men and beasts. Soldiers slipped and fell to their deaths. Hunger and exhaustion drove them to despair. Many feared they would never leave the mountains alive. Yet Hannibal pressed forward at the head of his army, encouraging his men through every hardship.
After roughly 9 days of grueling march, Hannibal's forces finally reached the summit. There, he is said to have proclaimed, "We have climbed to the top. The hardest part is behind us. 1 or 2 battles more, and Rome will be ours." But the descent proved even worse than the ascent. The paths were steep, narrow, and slippery. A single fall could drag others down in a deadly chain. Soldiers, elephants, and supplies were lost in great numbers.
Hold on!
Snow and ice made the slopes even more treacherous. Even on level ground, the ice was dangerous. On steep inclines, it was nearly impossible to keep footing. Men who tried to steady themselves with their hands or knees found themselves sliding again. The pack animals sank into deep snow, and the more they struggled, the deeper they sank. The descent cost more lives than the climb. After about 6 days of desperate effort, the army finally reached the plains below, but at a terrible cost.
By the time Hannibal's army descended into Italy, his remaining combat force numbered only about 20,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. When he had set out, his total strength, including elephants, had been around 100,000. At the Rhone, perhaps 46,000 to 52,000 remained. Of those, nearly half perished in the Alps. At this time, Hannibal was just 28 or 29 years old.
By late October 218 BCE, Hannibal had reached the Po Valley in northern Italy. Rome, still uncertain of his location or intentions, scrambled to gather intelligence. It was not until November, when Roman forces made direct contact with Hannibal's army, that they finally realized the full scale of the threat. That is where we will pause for today. In the next part, we will explore the first major battles between Hannibal's forces and the Roman legions. Thank you for watching.